OpenAI lost $21 billion in 2025. $21 billion. That's an insane amount of money. This company is continually losing more money every year.
What's in the air? You know what's in the air. You know what's in the air. You know what's in the air. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
Okay, so I watched the Majority Report do an interview with Ed Zitron. This is a guy who's been on the Majority Report before, and he has been a prominent critic, maybe one of the most prominent critics of AI over the last several years, consistently making the case that essentially the underlying economics and the numbers behind these companies in terms of how much they need to make to be profitable and how much they need to actually produce over the next few years in order to have the type of viability that they claim to have, and it just doesn't add up. So I have some criticisms of Zitron, which I'll get to later, light criticisms, although for the most part, his predictions seem to be becoming more and more true as time goes on. I've been aware of him for a couple years now because he was one of the first people that I saw publicly making the case that the type of innovation, the type of endless growth and endless improvement that was being promised in AI models was not sustainable at all. And, you know, people like OpenAI, Sam Altman, Elon Musk were essentially just lying not only about the capability of these models, but the actual intentions of what they're supposed to do and what even these guys think is going to happen economically. So here's the first part, just to give you a sense of the type of critiques that Zitron makes. Very sharp critiques. He's a very compelling speaker and writer. I highly recommend his work, his newsletter. But here he's talking about Elon Musk and his recent valuation of his companies being around $1 trillion, allowing him to claim now that he's a trillionaire, and everybody's talking about him being a trillionaire. So they get into that, into the sort of the specifics of that and his skepticism. This is classic Zitron style skepticism, which tends to be borne out, but not all evidence I've seen over the past several years points to the outcomes and conclusions that Zitron makes, even though I tend to agree with him on his conclusions. So here's him talking about SpaceX and Elon Musk.
So Elon Musk is doing exit liquidity. So SpaceX is actually several different companies stapled together. You've got X the Everything app, which is, of course, the social network, which features a CSAM generator and a non-consensual porn. It also loses tons of money and makes AI services under Grok. Lost, I think, $4 billion last year, or last quarter even. It loses billions of dollars on the AI side. Then there's Starlink, which is a satellite internet company that actually makes money. And then there is, of course, SpaceX, the boring rocket company that makes rockets that also explode and sometimes go up in the sky too. And yeah, it is now worth more than Amazon because the regulators don't really care. But you've got regular people, like you mentioned, buying into this IPO. Now it's popping again. Well, now everyone's going to buy into it. And I fear that the underlying economics do not make SpaceX work. And he's going to try and merge Tesla into it. He's going to try and merge a company called Cursor into it. This is just Elon Musk's attempt to escape the kind of collapse of Tesla. Tesla selling less cars every year. Their largest purchaser of Cybertrucks is SpaceX. It's all part of the big, giant Elon Musk circular financing jerk-off session that I'm deeply tired of watching. I don't think the public should be witness to this. It's horrible. But yeah, regulatory authorities, I don't know, I thought they were meant to stop garbage IPOs, but I guess inflating them is what this administration does. Elon Musk attached an unprofitable AI company to 2 others, and if he combines with Tesla, 3 others, I guess. And I think they were losing $1 billion a month or something, maybe more. Now they're renting out that capacity to Anthropic, but it isn't clear how long that'll go on for. It's just a complete mess. And retail investors are going to be the ones that are harmed if it all goes wrong.
All right, so here he's talking about how essentially this is a last-ditch effort by Elon Musk to tie a bunch of these companies together in order to, in his words, avoid the collapse of Tesla. So this is where I feel like rhetorically Zitron can be kind of exaggerative. And while in principle, in concept, I agree with what he's saying about Tesla, they are selling less cars every year. And, you know, Elon Musk almost certainly is thinking about how to adapt that company into something else, because a lot of the promises that Elon Musk has made surrounding Tesla, like self-driving cars, there was a point where he said it was going to be completely integrated with crypto and stuff like that. And obviously, almost every time Elon Musk makes any kind of promise, it doesn't come true, because it's really just meant to secure more investment. It's just meant to gin up excitement. And I feel the same way about the trillionaire valuation. They just kind of set things up that way so that it would continue to reaffirm faith in the Elon Musk, SpaceX, Tesla brand. That being said, the idea that Tesla is on the brink of collapse, or that Elon Musk's fortune is somehow on the brink of collapse, and that's why he's doing this or tying these companies together, I think that thinking that way primes one to feel like you're going to see the tail end of the Elon Musk legacy sometime soon, and I just don't think that's true. I also don't think it's true that he is a trillionaire, and I think that that is essentially a lie for the media. And it's, you know, this kind of house of cards that they're constructing in order to continue to secure investment. So I think his statement about the intentions of what Elon Musk is doing is correct, but stating it as he's trying to escape the collapse or put off the collapse of Tesla, it's indicative of the type of picture that Zitron likes to paint when it comes to these giant companies, that they're kind of on the brink of collapse. And while I agree with him in concept, I have not found it to be true. I think that he would have told you a company like OpenAI was going to collapse a couple years ago, or was on the brink of collapse a couple years ago. So when you take a broader lens and you look at where things are at, it does seem like it's going in the direction that he has pointed to consistently. It seems like it's becoming clear that the AI is not as productive as they promised it, and people are starting to realize that. Certainly there's uncertainty around that. So I think as time goes on, Zitron's predictions will continue to hold true. But I think something that he does is, when information comes out or news comes out that doesn't align with his predictions, he kind of moves the goalpost a little bit and talks and points to something more specific, that is not to say this company is on the brink of collapse, but is to say, well, this isn't as much of a gain as you said you were going to have, or this isn't as good of a turnaround as you said there was going to be, or as you would need in order to be viable. A couple years ago, I was very primed to feel like what we were seeing was going to be this sort of short-lived, spectacular failure of these AI companies, and so far that hasn't happened. And what I think is likely to happen is going to be sort of a slow cascade effect, where a lot of the assets and data centers and companies that make up this whole clusterfuck are going to essentially get chopped into parts and sold off in a way that does resemble a collapse, and certainly will be a collapse that hits many people, but it is also going to allow people like Sam Altman and Elon Musk to float away to safety. That's kind of what I think. I think on their end, it's not going to look as much like a collapse as it is going to look like, sort of a disassembling and transformation of the economy. So I want to get to that at the end. Here is another part here where they're talking about OpenAI specifically. And here I don't really have much of an issue with what he's saying, because I think on OpenAI, his critique has turned out to be pretty rock solid. And I think he's correct in what he's saying here.
OpenAI apparently is also planning an IPO this year. Mm-hmm. I noticed they moved from not profit to profit, which just as a side note, I was contacted by a reporter from The Atlantic some time ago saying that this show has been scrubbed, about 11,000 episodes of our show. It's been scrubbed by a series of not-profit AI institutes, which they do to avoid having to theoretically have any monetary compensation responsibility. Then they get all the information they want out of our show and others, obviously. And then they use that on their as they convert to a for-profit enterprise.
Right. I mean, with that, it's that is just the nature of their BS training. They just steal from everyone. And what's funny is, well, don't know if I'd call it funny for you, I guess, is it's still not enough. They still don't have enough. Even if they took every show on the internet, every document on the internet, everything, they don't have enough because there's no proof that there's actually enough data. They fed basically the entire internet into these things and they still kind of suck. They still hallucinate because hallucinations, so authoritatively stating something that isn't true or just doing something different than what they were asked, those are mathematically certain now. OpenAI themselves said it. So it's this kind of losing game where they just burn as much money as possible in the hopes that something will change, but nothing changes, which makes them burn even more money. It's like a classic degenerate gambler situation. Fact of the matter is, OpenAI lost $21 billion in 2025. $21 billion, that's an insane amount of money. This company is continually losing more money every year. It is going to get worse in 2026, and if they make it to 2027, it's going to be even worse there. They plan to burn over $852 billion by the end of 2030. And if they cannot raise or make the money to pay that, if they do not have the cash flow, they could kill Oracle. Like they could actually, they account for $300 billion of Oracle's upcoming revenue. And Larry Ellison has leveraged a lot of his stock on this, but
this could be a twofer.
It could be a multi-fer at this point because OpenAI is a load-bearing fail-son. They account for $250 billion of Microsoft's upcoming revenue. They account for $300 billion, like I mentioned, with Oracle, $138 billion of Amazon's revenue, $22 billion of CoreWeave's. They have all of these people they promise money to, and yet I don't know where the money's going to come from other than funding. The government is, even a right-wing government, is still not going to be accepting of bailing out OpenAI, or indeed, I don't know, plugging them into government systems and keeping them alive that way. And even then, putting all of that aside, if OpenAI dies, the semiconductor rally dies. Everything, every stock that's AI related is still going to crash because the whole point of OpenAI is it's symbolic. It's symbolic of the idea that we need more data centers everywhere, always, forever. That we need more data centers we've ever had because OpenAI is one of the largest consumers of AI compute. There's no one else big enough other than Anthropic, who also loses billions of dollars. So you can try and plug various gaps here, but nothing is going to change the fact that the stock market is what everyone thinks is the AI bubble, because the actual companies themselves, their actual economics suck, and the actual products do not do the kind of transformative things that they are promising they will do. And big businesses run by people that don't do anything, spending way too much on AI tokens, which they're already talking about pulling back. The thing is, this entire situation is symbolic. It's kayfabe. It's people pretending that they understand, or cynical people pretending that this is the future, jumping around and play acting and saying, "Ooh, AI is so scary, AI is so powerful." But when you look at the underlying things that these models do and the actual outcomes, they're not there, they're not present in any productivity data because they don't really improve productivity. Yeah. So this whole thing, I genuinely think that there is an authority crisis coming after this because so many people fell for this. And I think it's because so much of our economy is run by people who just trust the last smart sounding person they talk to.
So yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that he says here. And I think that over the years, his critiques of OpenAI have been very consistent. So even though there have been times where OpenAI does have numbers to report in terms of the investment they're getting, right? Like an example would be, Zitron saying that the numbers look bad enough that OpenAI isn't going to be able to secure a certain amount of funding that they need to keep the wheels turning because it's becoming clear that the product isn't viable, it's not working, etc. And then they do turn around the funding. And so now it's like, okay, this project has been extended, even though I agree with you that the valuation doesn't work and this product doesn't really seem to be delivering in the way that it's supposed to. And I kind of just see a lot of degradation in the areas that it is being implemented, still somehow they're finding the money. And so I think overall, what I'm saying here is that we should not underestimate the ability for the money to keep appearing for this. And even if the project eventually deflates or collapses, I think these guys are working on building themselves lifeboats right now. And that's essentially what he was saying about Elon Musk, is that Elon Musk has created this kind of perverse circle jerk where he's getting federal money and then that's going into his companies and he's moving money around in the companies. And OpenAI has a different version of that where it's like a nonprofit at first. And Sam says this thing about how his content was being used by a third-party data scraping and training nonprofit, supposedly, which then services the for-profit AI companies, sells the data to them, or just becomes a for-profit entity. And he says that The Atlantic reached out to him about that a while back, and they recently have published a couple databases of all of the music that is listed as being used in these various data sets. So these are kind of intermediary data sets to companies like Udio and Suno that are using the data, which essentially amounts to most of the music out there on the internet. And if you're a musician, you should look into this and see if your stuff is in there. I imagine class action lawsuits will come from this. Udio and Suno, I believe, are both already facing lawsuits. But again, even with that, they're still operating. They still find investment. They are still doing an output. They still find public-facing people that are willing to hawk the product. And so the longer I see that go on, the less I feel like the result of it is going to be like, oh, well, in about a year, this AI stuff washes out once the bubble pop happens. I would like to think that's what's going to happen. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's what Ed Zitron claims, but his rhetoric sometimes does kind of point to that. And more so what I see is that these addictive technologies that these people have created are going to continue to scratch and claw their way through the economy by the nature of their addictiveness. And so I think OpenAI pivoted to that at a certain point. Instead of saying we're going to try to make the most productive AIs that we can make that are going to replace all the workers, they said, we just need to make sure that people get addicted to this, that people will keep using it. And it's what has driven them towards an advertising model, which is something they never said they were going to do. But once you get users addicted to what you're doing, then suddenly pretty much the only useful thing that your product can do is advertise to people. And to me, it seems like a lot of the AI is just becoming more of a sort of self-fulfilling entertainment vehicle. It's like just entertainment for you. It's not even really something that you can use towards a bigger project. And plenty of people do. It's usually noticeable when you do. It usually degrades your product. And for the most part, I think even people who are making apps or doing coding with AI or whatever, it's not that useful outside of your own interest in whatever project you're doing. But that doesn't mean that it's going to go away. And that doesn't mean that people are not going to continue to be addicted to this stuff. But I do think that the implications on the job market and the fact that this has not turned into something that is going to replace labor on a mass scale, although it is doing that around the edges a little bit, I still think that the companies that do that are gonna face some punishment. We're not seeing a moment in time where like the amount of labor in the labor force is going to shrink because of AI. However, if there's a trend in the market to, try to slim down on laborers, and then that doesn't work, the AI does not return the productivity, or companies that have invested in the idea of AI hoping that eventually down the line they'll get to replace some of their workers and have set up their financials that way, which I think is a lot of companies like Amazon. If that doesn't work, what that's going to mean is that the workers have more leverage. So something that was meant to discipline labor and decrease the leverage that it has is actually going to circle back around, because workers are going to have more leverage in an environment where companies are bleeding because they decided to invest in AI and not their workers. And so I think we're going to basically be in an environment in a couple years where AI is the predominant topic of discussion. And, you see this across the political spectrum. People hate these data centers. People hate these data centers. And on sort of an implicit level, people recognize that the AI companies and the creep of AI is something that is a threat to them on some level, their way of life, their comfort, their place in the economy. And that is only going to become more and more true to people. What's likely to happen on the Democratic Party side is we're going to see a repeat of what happened with Israel, where they completely refuse to see the fact that that is the number one issue that people care about at the moment and refuse to take a strong stance on it, rather than just saying, I am the candidate who is going to fight these AI companies to secure your rights. But if a candidate can be floated essentially through DSA that is able to signal to the unions and create a harmonized message against AI that is channeled through a candidate that's making real promises, also tied to things like imperialism abroad, scaling back Palantir and other types of, military industrial investments, and also things like healthcare, that's going to be the winning message for any type of left-leaning candidate in 2028. So our job is to make sure that the Democratic Party leans in that direction and also does not lose focus on that AI issue. Certainly, if there aren't any candidates on the left or in the Democratic Party that can service that, there are going to be grifters on the right who notice that and take advantage of that. And I do not know if I agree with Ed Zitron's assessment that even a right-wing government is not going to want to bail out a company like OpenAI. I see what he's saying on that, but I'm not sure if I would bet on that one.